Good evening, good evening, good evening. It is Tuesday and it is 8 p.m. Eastern time. So you know what time it is, right? It's Real Money Coach time. I am so glad that you guys are tuning in. And you know what we do on the Real Money Coach. You come on in, put in the chat box where you're watching from, what city, what state, what country, where are you watching from? So put that in the chat box so that we know, we can acknowledge you, can say hello to you this evening. It is wow. I, I got so much to say tonight, man. I mean, I got like a whole lot of issues to talk about. So, uh, I'm gonna do a lot of that. I'm gonna do a lot of yakking and all this kind of stuff, y'all, tonight because I got a lot to say. Got a lot to say. But I tell you what, we have a great show for you tonight. We got a great show. We have two individuals. That's right. We got two guests tonight. We don't do that a whole lot, but we got two guests tonight because I think it's so important that we talk about the issue of voting and exercising your right to vote. Right, going to the polls. I early voted. I did my thing. I hope you all are also taking advantage of that, doing your thing. Harvey Jones, thank you for being here from Birmingham, Alabama. Harvey is in the house. So now the Harvey's got started. We know the rest of y'all gonna come in. There's Janice Leak, the Rainmaker from Maryland. Listen, we getting internet, we getting nationwide tonight. They coming in. Where my Charlotteans at? Where my regular Charlotte folks? Where y'all at? Come on, put it in the chat. I see you online. I see you got more than just Harvey and Janice. There we go. Alice Martin from Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you, Alice, for being here so often, every week, supporting the Real Money Coach and so much of that we do. So listen, let me do this because I have a lot to say, but I just don't want to talk to myself. So let's bring our co-host on the show. Let's bring Michelle Mitchell on. Michelle, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Tony?
Good. What's going on in Kalamazoo, Michigan?
Oh, I'm finally over jet lag, I think.
Oh, that's right. Because you, between last week and this week, you went to Arizona.
Arizona. Yeah, 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 yeah.
How was Arizona? Look, Benita Harris is in the house from Charlotte, North Carolina. Um, so how was Arizona?
Arizona. It was my first time to Arizona, so it was different than it was the desert. So
It is the desert, not a whole lot
it
of
was,
trees,
it
right?
was the desert.
We got Ruth Bell is in the house. I think Ruth recently had a birthday. I think we did
Oh yeah,
try to
last
shout that
week.
out last week. So
Hmm.
happy birthday. Because there was this issue with StreamYard that we use and interacting with Facebook. And so we were saying it. And then when I see the chat afterwards, I saw that Ruth was on and kind of
Yes,
got that.
yes,
So it
yes.
is the desert down there. Was it
It
hot?
is the No, it was not hot.
Really? Really?
No. It was a little chilly, so you had to have a jacket in the morning and definitely in the evening. During
Okay.
the day, I mean, I was at a strategic planning session, so I didn't see much sunlight. But if you went
Gotcha.
outside and stood in the sun, it was warm. But
Okay.
if you were in the shade, it was a little chilly.
A little chilly.
Little chilly.
Well, Michelle, let me tell you something. Here in the Queen City, I
Oh,
had a weekend.
oh
Oh my
yes.
goodness. I don't know if you saw any of the Facebook stuff, but the all black national convention, Dr. Boyce Watkins was outstanding. Is
Wow.
outstanding. We had, I don't know, 400 or 500 people there at least that. I don't know what the actual number was, but it was
Wow.
it was packed on Friday. So Friday night, this is what happened. I'm just gonna run down through the weekend really quick
Okay.
with y'all, right? Because I'm excited about it. I want all y'all to hear about my weekend. So on Friday, I went down earlier. It's VIP, day, whatever, because I was a speaker. So I had lunch with Boyce and we were chatting. And then immediately after that, um, we had a conversation. We had a meeting planned. At this meeting was my mentor, billionaire Michael V. Roberts,
Mm-hmm.
my mentor, Dr. George C. Fraser,
Mm-hmm.
myself, Marlon, and James Smudgy Mitchell, who is a city council person here. And so we were having a conversation about bringing the Power Networking Conference to Charlotte. And then we also had, and I can't quite remember her last name, but I think it was Chelsea. She was from um, the regional visitors bureau. I'm not getting it quite
Okay.
right, but
Mm-hmm.
so she was there too. So it was a great meeting. And for me, I like to sit back and watch these meetings. And you watch someone like George has been doing this for 20 years. You got Michael Roberts, who's the master negotiator, right? I mean,
Right.
you don't become a billionaire unless you know how to put some deals together.
Right.
And then Smudgy Mitchell was a great guy. I met him on a couple of times. So it was pretty awesome, pretty awesome. So that was Friday. And then so Friday after that meeting, I run home, change clothes, get Lisa, go back because I spoke on Friday evening.
Okay.
So they had one keynote speaker, and then I was after him. So there was four of us that spoke.
Mm-hmm.
And so my topic was GoFundMe ain't life insurance. Right?
Oh, okay. Good
That was
topic.
my topic. So
Good
people
topic.
enjoyed that topic.
Mm-hmm.
And I use this one liner I got from George's sister. He's like, she said, when young ladies come to me, this is Dr. Emmons. She said, when young ladies come to me and ask me what they should look for in a man, this is what I tell them. I tell them, you know, you want to find a man who keeps on giving even after he's done living. So I was like, wow. Okay. Well, people
That's
love that.
pretty
So
good.
that was Friday.
Mm-hmm.
That was Friday.
Wow.
So get up Saturday morning. I go down. Lisa joins a little bit later. Great workshops on everything from day trading to investing, real estate, to health and fitness, to living off of your own land, you know,
Mm-hmm.
farming, you know,
Mm-hmm.
producing for yourself. And so we had that. Michael was on stage. Michael Roberts was on stage. All these type of things, and then that night was the gala. So
Mm-hmm.
the gala was we. So then we came home, changed, went back for the gala, where Dr. Frazier received the Lifetime Achievement Award. Dr. Michael V. Roberts received um, the Black Excellence Award.
Okay.
And so, and the whole thing is this. The whole thing is B1. That's
Mm-hmm.
the community B1, which stands for Black First.
Right.
Oh well, you remember she was on the
Yes.
show. Shar was on the
Yes.
show, so
Mm-hmm.
it really was an awesome weekend. It was an awesome
That's
weekend.
amazing.
Um, so and as I said on Facebook, I don't want to say she's trophy wife, but I had my wife in my arm, looking
I
all
know.
good, making me look good, right? That's what I'm talking
I
about.
know. I saw my bestie.
You saw her?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, I did.
And then yesterday, I had a strategic meeting with Michael Roberts and some other people from around the country flew in. So we were talking about innovation and things that we can do in the Black community to create jobs and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of futuristic stuff.
Right.
So, yeah. So
Yeah.
that was my Friday through Monday, and it
That's
was great.
amazing. That's
It was
awesome.
great. I loved it. So next time you guys have to go.
Yes.
I don't know where it will be next year.
They
I
didn't
think
announce it.
no, they didn't. They got
Mhm.
3 locations. They wanted the people there to vote on where they wanted to
Mm,
go next.
okay.
So it was New York, Las Vegas, and Detroit
Ooh.
was the three options that they
You
were.
if you haven't been to Detroit in a minute,
It's been a minute.
it's different from when we used to go to Detroit. So,
Okay.
yeah.
You know, y'all back in our younger days,
Right.
right? Back in our younger days, Michelle and her husband, Elisa and I, um, you know, like we go to bed at like 11 o'clock now.
Right.
Back then, we used to get in the car on our way to Detroit
At
at
10.
11 o'clock. At
Right.
11 o'clock, right?
Yes.
And so we gonna go to the jazz club, the Club Penta, and we gonna
Yep.
stay there till 2 o'clock, and then
Fishbones.
make the hour drive back. So that it ain't the same Detroit.
No, no, it's not. No.
So
It has
and you know,
definitely improved.
it was interesting. One of my clients that was at the meeting drove up from Miami, actually. He said he hadn't been to Charlotte in 20 years. And he was
Mm.
just talking about how it's changed over the
Mhm.
last 20 years and, just how it's grown.
Mhm.
And so we think that's pretty good stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So, Michelle, I got a question for you.
What's that?
Have you early vote? I don't want to put you on blast. You made your early vote yet?
Of course, my vote gonna count.
Your vote gonna count?
Yes, it is. It's already in the ballot box.
It's already in the ballot box.
That's
That's what
right.
I'm saying. So,
Mhm.
um,
And I'm
and you
making
know,
my daughter drive home to bring her ballot back because she waited too long. Like, nah, you got to bring it home.
so Danny's got to come back home.
Yeah, she
Bring
got
it.
to come home to vote.
Okay,
Mhm.
and she's still in Holland.
She's still in Holland. Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
so you gonna make my baby drive back and catch her vote? That's
Yes.
good. I mean,
It's
because we
that
need
important. Yes.
it is that important,
Mhm.
and really, that's what our show is going to be about tonight.
Mhm.
My show on Praise 100.9 on Saturday, I went total political, right? So I went totally political,
Did you?
talking about voting, because here's
Mhm.
the thing. One of the issues that we talked about on the Money Minutes on the radio on Monday and Wednesday of last week is about the student loan deal, right? Because
Mhm.
how you got 6 states that filed a lawsuit
Yep.
to block it, which it is postponed. I hear, President Biden is saying that he believes they're going to win the case and all this.
Mhm.
But you have judges from one party, right? Let's
Mhm.
call it Republican Party, right? And so you got all these judges that are going to, maybe it's a committee. I'm not sure how it'll be decided. But anyway, you got to fight through that in
Yep.
order to continue with this student loan forgiveness.
Mhm.
And that led into the fact that we need to get out and vote,
Yes.
because those judges are appointed by the president,
Mhm.
and even grassroots things, we need to get out and vote. And
Mhm.
so then I was like, man, I really want to have this show be about voting.
Mhm.
And so my helpmate, my wife says, hey, why don't you contact the Black Caucus, right? The Black Political Caucus, and see if someone would come and speak. And I was like, that's a brilliant idea.
She
And
is so smart. Oh my god.
so that's what
Alisa.
we did. So
Oh,
guess what? Tonight we have representatives from the Black, and I don't know how they say it, but it's the Political Black Caucus of Charlotte Mecklenburg. So we
okay.
have the former chairperson and Stephanie Sneed, who's, by the way, she's on the ballot so this year, and then we have the person who replaced her as chair, Caleb, and they're going to be our guest tonight, and we're going to unpack this thing called voting.
Awesome.
And I just want us to keep it very real tonight when we have this conversation, no hold back, right?
Mhm.
Because we're not having these conversations and being really real about it.
Right.
And so I want to do that. And then the other thing that I did was on my radio show, I also went through the 10 reasons why we want to vote, in particular, how it affects finance, because this is the Real
Mhm.
Money Coach show. So
Right.
how does it affect the economy? How does it affect your money? Why is it important that we exercise this right to vote?
Mhm.
So that's really what I want to unpack tonight. And and I'm thinking we better bring our guest on, because you know how fast the time go. And we
I
got two
know.
guests tonight. Man, come on, right? So
Yeah.
um look, Ruth Bell says, yes, that is who I'm campaigning for.
For
Are you campaigning for Stephanie Sneed? I know you guys might be there, or I'm thinking that's what you're saying. If so, and it's so great that, and this other thing that we can unpack tonight is you can cast your vote, and that's huge, right? That's number
Mhm.
one. But what are other ways we can get involved to advance political issues that affect us, right? And to
Right.
me, everything is politics. Everything is about money.
It is.
It all boils down to dollars,
It
right? And
all boils
politics.
down to dollars. It does.
It
Mhm,
does, right?
mhm,
So let's not be foolish and
mhm.
think that it's not that money doesn't have any
Right.
issue with it, right?
And we all can play a part because we are all connected to someone else who needs to go cast their vote. And it took me 2 days to go through my ballot and research every item on the ballot,
Okay,
every person and every item on the ballot. I did my legwork
you did
so
your
that
leg.
I was an informed voter. And we
So
need to teach that to our children and our grandchildren who are eligible to vote, and they need to they need to use their vote as their voice.
absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Now that's why you and my wife are best friends. Okay, because y'all spend a lot of time researching it. I,
Yep.
I I did do some, right? I did do some reading on the issues and the
Mm,
candidates and all this stuff
yeah.
because I'm not a straight ticket voter.
Me either.
Um, you know, I'm not a straight ticket voter, so there may be some people, cross whichever line I might
Mhm,
vote for. Um, just depending on the individual. Most of
mhm.
mine lie in one area, but just because you are a Republican doesn't mean I'm not going to vote for you. Just because you're a Democrat mean that I
Right,
will. I
right.
want to see where you fall on issues that are
Where do you
important to me.
stand? Yeah.
And and
What
when
is
we
your
can do
voting
that,
record? And like, what have you been saying on the campaign trail? And what do you believe in? Yeah.
all those things, all
All
those
those things
things.
are important to
Yep,
me.
yep.
Mhm,
And if anybody tells you you shouldn't vote because of, uh, you vote your conscience, right?
mhm.
You're supposed to vote for people that gonna do stuff that you want done. It ain't
Right.
nothing wrong with that. That's
Nothing wrong with
why
that.
we vote.
Mhm.
That's
That's
why
why
we,
you vote.
that's why we vote. Because I'm
Yeah.
voting for people that don't want to get stuff done that I want to see done.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So, but anyway, Dante, let's go ahead and bring our guest on. Let's bring Caleb on, who is the current chair of the Political Black Caucus here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Caleb, how are you doing this evening, sir?
Good. I'm doing good. Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can hear you. We can hear
Welcome,
you.
Caleb.
I'm well. I'm well. Thank you. How are you?
We're
Good.
doing great. We're doing great. And we have someone coming with Caleb, which is also, she's the former chair, and she is in the person of Miss Stephanie Sneed. Stephanie, how are you?
Good evening. How are you? Happy to be here.
Good. We
Good to
are
have you.
happy to have the two of you here so we can unpack this thing and get real about casting some votes, right?
Mhm.
Because there
Absolutely.
are some issues on the ballot that are important, that matter, as they always are.
Mhm.
What I'd like to do before we get into some of those things, I'd like for you each to kind of introduce yourself to our audience and give us a little background of who you are and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, sure. My name is Caleb Tedros. I'm the acting chair of the Black Political Caucus, and term with the Black Political Caucus. I want to say it's been about 2 months now, but I've been an active member for years now, and so I've been involved politically in Charlotte. I want to say for a while now. I moved here maybe 15 years ago, and so when I was, high school Democrats over at Harding, and I went to UNC Charlotte. I was at College Democrats there, and then after kind of graduating, I maintained my involvement around the city, working with a lot of people that were in elected office, working on certain policy issues, whether it was affordable housing or economic development. And I sort of made my way to the executive team of the Black Political Caucus, I want to say about a year and a half ago, under Stephanie Sneed, who was our chair at the time. And we did a lot of great work in that about roughly a year and a half. Whether it was pursuing certain policies, especially around education, affordable housing, the current 2040 plan with Black Political Caucus had a big voice in that. And so Following that time, I guess that's where we kind of go into Stephanie's intro. But she decided to follow a calling, and a lot of people asked her to essentially run, and that's when I ascended to become acting chair of the Black Political Congress.
Awesome. And Stephanie, let's get a little bit of your background.
So I'm Stephanie Sneed. I am your immediate past chair of the Black Political Caucus, but the role that I'm in now is that I'm a school board candidate. I have been in Charlotte over 10 years now, almost 11. And I am, stepped down from being the chair, and Caleb and I, as the first vice chair, accomplished a lot as a part of the Black Political Caucus. One thing that he forgot to mention is that we did take a position on, issues that deal with transportation as well, and how they affect the economics and the development of our community. We've also dealt with gentrification and housing that he's mentioned as well, in addition to all of those policy issues. But we have also, including the 2040 plan, but we've also at the Black Political Caucus, of course, we dealt with voter turnout issues, like how do we motivate people to turn out the vote, and knocking on people's doors and to say, hey, it's time to vote. And of course, through our process, we also endorse candidates. So because we are the largest nonpartisan organization that addresses voters issues that are pertinent to Black voters, we endorse candidates that we believe that will support our interests. But that's enough about the caucus. Just about me is that I've been engaged politically in Charlotte almost that entire time of those 10 years. That over 10 years that I've been here, I've been the vice chair of my voting precinct, my Democratic voting precinct. Just always have been involved in the Black Political Caucus for quite some time. And now I'm a candidate for school board because, again, as Caleb mentioned, it was asked to do that because it felt that my leadership skills would be more useful or just as important on the school board it is of the Black Political Caucus. But Caleb has taken the reins and run with it to continue the great work of the caucus.
That is awesome, and I want to do this. I want to encourage those who might be listening. If you have questions that you want to put into the chat, please do that, because I want us to unpack some things. Certainly unpack some things that are important locally, but some things that are also important on a national level. And what we're seeing, I think, is this push to suppress voting rights and access to voting. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that. I know that there's probably in a number of states, there's probably some things on the ballot that has to do with access to voting, early voting. We've heard about different things in different states, and limiting the people that can go to the polls and can't have water, and all these type of things. So give us a little bit of your thoughts as it relates to voter suppression.
Yeah, I mean, voter suppression, especially in this country, isn't anything new. And I think just to kind of the brief history on it, obviously when at a certain point, African Americans had the right to vote. And so folks that were in power needed more creative ways to ensure that the least amount of African Americans could vote. So if you take a look at whether it was poll taxes or the way they drew the certain districts. Now you fast forward about 100 or so years, and we still see around the country that there are different ways at the state level that they're hindering, especially African Americans, from voting. One of them is just where they places the areas that you can vote, places with a high number of African Americans. You're oftentimes seeing that there's a low amount of voting locations. You have to drive for a minute to get to even somewhere to vote. So one of the most prominent ways that they've been restricting voting is the way they draw their districts. And it's something that we've seen in North Carolina is pretty much on the national level with this is instead of taking a look at the population and just cutting the districts in an objective way, they try to look at which area has, let's say, just an example, because both Democrats and Republicans have done this. So they try to look at a place that is solidified Democrat. Let's say you have an area that's solid Democrat. They will draw a congressional line and split that into two. And so that way, when you can join this larger Democratic area with two other Republican areas, you have ensured that these two separate districts are now going to be Republican, even though there are a ton of Democrats that live there. And so we've seen at certain court cases has gone to the state Supreme Court, and they even in the last ruling suggested that the people discriminated against African Americans using surgical precision. So they went in there intentionally in order to do so. And so this is, something that we've been kind of pushing back on, because, no matter your political affiliation, how you vote, and I heard Michelle say your voice is your vote earlier, how your vote doesn't matter, but you should have the right to vote. It should be made easy. There's no reason why we're putting even more roadblocks in a country that has a low voter turnout anyways. And so the fact that they're using race and socioeconomic background to prevent you from voting is something that we've seen has been a tool, unfortunately, by both parties. But right now, we see it more so from our friends on the right.
So a good example of that Caleb has given, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, was it North Carolina A&T campus that was split in half?
Yes, their congressional district. Yeah.
Their congressional district campus of A&T, and I believe it was, I'm almost positive it was A&T. One half of it was one voting district. The other half of it was a different district. So that's like a perfect example of surgical precision of trying to disenfranchise voting.
Right.
So you listen, if you live on this side of the campus, you're in one district. If you live on this side of the campus, you're in another district. Wow.
And just to jump in, and I can make one last point, and you even see the attempt at a local level where certain politicians will be put on a board to draw certain districts, and maybe they see somebody they don't want to run against, so they draw the district so that they cut somebody's house out. We're here to tell the truth.
Yeah, we don't want to hide.
So I mean, so that particularly happened in my race. Like, my opponent was submitted some maps for consideration, and it was a carve out for my precinct, which is small, and to move it into a different district.
And wow. We know that these type of things have gone on for a lot in a number of different things. Like you got redlining in insurance, you got redlining in banking, and this is a form of redlining, so to speak, in the political process as well. And so I know, like, early voting and some of those type of things are being voted on in some states. I think you guys hit something like that in Michigan. I think a bill on early voting, didn't you, Michelle? Wasn't there?
Yeah, so we don't have early voting in Michigan, but what we do have is absentee ballots, and we could fill out one form to say always send me an absentee ballot, and that was challenged. So that's what you're thinking.
So they're saying that about getting an absentee ballot
right. You have to do new paperwork every time there's an election to get an absentee ballot.
So as Thomas Burt said, gerrymandering, right? That's what all that boils down to, is gerrymandering. So I want to talk about a couple issues. I want to ask you guys, because you mentioned something, one that came up that I think is an issue that we really need to talk about. I know it's on the ballot here, affordable housing. I tell people all the time, there's not a housing problem in Charlotte, but there's an affordable housing issue, right? And we're seeing this in a lot of different cities. I for one, on this show, was very critical of even the program that Bank of America came out with, because it just lended itself to more of the gentrification of our neighborhoods and all these types of things. So tell us a little bit about what's going on in terms of affordable housing here locally, and I imagine it could be the same across the country in many locations.
So I'm going to take a first stab at that, and then I'll let Caleb, because he always eloquently speaks about this issue. But I want to offer a different perspective to you in terms of affordable housing. So for me, everything ties back to education, right? So the lack of affordable housing can be tied directly to education because it has to deal with whether you have the ability, if you're upwardly economically mobile, right, that can afford different price points for housing. If you don't have a good education system, then you are relegating a huge amount of students that become adults, of them being unable to be upward economically mobile because they don't have the education base that they need in order to have advanced careers, like something that will allow them to advance into, tech or any of the other the much needed or talent, or so they can be a part of the talent pool that pays higher wages. So that's why, education in these board of education races is important, because really we need to be talking about the ability of adults to be able to make a livable wage, or more than livable wage, with advanced career opportunities.
And I think that's so important. And Caleb,
Yeah.
we'll have you lean in on this too. But it's been well documented, right, for those of us in Charlotte, that we were ranked, 50 out of 50 in terms of if you were born in Charlotte, or I don't know if it was Charlotte or Mecklenburg County or whatever it was, but if you were born poor, that we ranked 50 out of 50 of you getting out of that situation. And I've often talked about that it's a tale of two cities, right? It's a tale of a city if you came here versus if you were born here, right? And a good friend of mine before I moved here, he says, I've never seen anybody move anyone with education come back, right? So if you got a good education, you can make a living, because let's be honest, the cost of living in Charlotte is not cheap, and so you need high wages.
Right.
And I think not only, and I think the education has to happen, but of course, we're very big on also financial education, because it's one thing to make a lot of money. It's another thing to know how to manage that money when you make it. And so all of that becomes part of the issue. So Caleb, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, affordable housing is definitely an issue, especially in Charlotte, that we've talked about a while. And I mean, you can look at this from kind of multiple angles. So I think ultimately affordable housing is an economic development issue. It's houses are there, some supply, especially in Charlotte, but people just aren't able to afford them. We have transplants from certain industries, just like the banking industry, where traditionally they have a higher income. And so they're going to bid higher on some of the available housing. And so the ones that are left, there's a big gap. So there are multiple places that you can try to address this from. I think the city is the one who oftentimes makes decisions on economic development and affordable housing. But I think for this race, Stephanie makes an excellent point to where all of this also ties in with education. I think, just like you said, it is important that people know how to manage their money, but also what kind of economic opportunities are there. When I went to Harding High School, and at the time, it wasn't necessarily ranked as the best high school, but when I was getting ready to graduate, there was a table trying to convince us to join the military, which is fine and admirable. We didn't see any other tables about, blue collared jobs, training programs that we can go to, select universities coming to join us and tell us about some of the career opportunities. I mean, later on in my career, I ended up, working in banking, and I was an auditor. I couldn't tell you what an auditor was when I was in high school. And so some of these things also do fall back on education. And that's why it's extremely important that we have people have a nuanced understanding of what education policy looks like. It also looks like making economic development better. It also looks like helping to tackle affordable housing. And we need people like Stephanie that has an all-inclusive idea of what that looks like. And so I agree, it's a very complex issue. We can spend hours talking about what we can do, from, talking about wages. How do we attract certain industries that are able to provide opportunities for people that don't necessarily have a college degree, because we talk about providing jobs all the time, and a job is nice, but people want a career. People want somewhere that they can grow and contribute to the city. And so ultimately the bedrock of that is going to be education. And so we need a board of education. We need candidates like Stephanie who have that level of nuanced understanding.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing as you were talking about you made it very real, right? At Harding, and my daughter, she recently was a teacher at Harding, ESL teacher, in fact. But when you think about, you had ROTC and you had the military there, but where was the Bank of Americas? Where was the Googles? Where were these other type of tech industries, where we know that tech is big now, right? So we need to Stephanie's standpoint, I'm sure that she's probably very passionate about things like STEM education and STEAM education and some of these type of things that we need to get our kids involved in so that they can innovate. One of the things that we talk about in the Roberts Innovation Group that I'm a part about is just even think about esports, right? Esports is a $1 billion industry, and we make up 70% of that, of the users, but only 2% of the employers or employees or involved in that. And yeah, you got kids now that can make hundreds of thousands of dollars doing esports at 14 years old, but there's a whole lot of jobs there that our children aren't getting. And I do know that's an issue, and I'm gonna let Stephanie stab at it, because I know she's got something to say on that. But those types of things.
So it's important that, in terms of education, so it's a couple of things that's important. That one is, even for those tech jobs, like, we have to make sure that we get the fundamentals right? Because now we just give a number for math one students across the board, regardless of race, socioeconomic class, gender. Math one is you either taking in 8th grade or you taking in 9th grade. So I believe the number is like us. It's over 85% of the students are not proficient that took math one. Like, that's alarming. So that's like that is something that, math is a universal language. Like, those type of things are alarming. So we have to make sure we're getting these fundamentals right. Like, we just absolutely, that's the emergency of this, right? The second thing is we have to start taking a different approach. Now, this is a charge that'll be for our new superintendent, who the board is going to be responsible for hiring, is that we have to start taking an approach of, yes, just like Caleb said, a broad approach into the type of exposure and opportunities that we give our students. Like, so we can't, have a same model that all students are going to be going to go to a 4-year university or even, your community college. So the requirement or the goal of is that every student leaves CMS college or career ready, right? So we have to make sure we put the tools in place for that. In terms of exposure, like Caleb said, he didn't know what an auditor was. So there are lots of careers that that students and families don't know are available. One of the things that I can tell you in my grassroots work is that, I, partnered with some other community organizations, and we partnered high school students with a company, a steel plant, right? So those students had a career path and had, a career as soon as they graduated from high school. Like, they were waiting on them to finish school. And that job, is something that, pays well over a living wage because it's in such high demand. So all of these trade skills are in such high demand. We have to start exposing kids and students and families to these pathways much earlier. Like, it really needs to, it can't be the high school stage, right?
Nope.
It needs to really start in junior high school.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I think it's great. And these are the type of issues, again, the reason why it's important that regardless of where you are watching from, I know we have people in other states, even has people, outside of the Charlotte Met area, that you get involved in your local elections, because
Mhm.
these are the issues that are important. Another word that stood out to me is we talked about transportation, and I've heard many people say, uh, it's hard to live in Charlotte without a car, right? Um, because we don't have the mass transit that some cities similar size have. And I know, so Caleb, what do you think about that issue?
Yeah, I know there's a large uh, what is it, tax on the ballot right now, essentially for transit-oriented development. And so there is a plan from the city's perspective, whether I think it's more funding for the light rail. They're trying to, I believe, revamp kind of our busing system. And so, there's a lot going on, especially transportation. I do hope that it's a bit more equitable in the way that it's distributed. I think, especially our busing system is extremely archaic. The way they've traditionally done busing is you have a central hub. It goes out to each corner of the city, but people are starting to rethink the logic of always needing to go back uptown. Why does every bus need to go uptown and then out? And so there has to be a better way to essentially do things. And so I think transportation is a big thing, but all of these things are essentially connected. We have
Mhm.
at the same time, are we intentional with our transportation in ensuring that certain people are being commuted to areas that they can find work? There's here we have a hub where Amazon employs a lot of people. Are we ensuring that we have bus routes to these locations from their neighborhood? And that's something that the Black Political
Oh,
Caucus.
and I never really even thought about that too, but you're right. I mean, the most of the Amazon warehouses, that's probably District 2, right? I think is where most of them is, out by the airport, and
District.
then yeah, and so, but if I live on the east side, how am I going to get over there if I don't have a car? You
Yeah.
know, there's no light rail, those type of things. So that's a very good point. Is getting people to where the jobs are,
Mhm.
right? And they can't necessarily, when you're starting out, obviously you can't afford to live there, maybe, and um, so yeah, that's a very, very, very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So, um, a couple other things on a national level. I talked a little bit about the student loan debt forgiveness. I know that South Carolina, I believe North Carolina was also one of states that would say if the forgiveness does happen, it is income to the individual
Mhm.
for that forgiveness. Any thoughts from either of you on that?
Well, I think that I mean, of course, this is it makes a difference on who who you have as in your general assembly, and that can change these type of decisions. Certainly if you're qualified for forgiveness, we should have the position that it shouldn't then turn around and be taxed and determined as income. So that to me just ties directly to, it matters who you vote for in general assembly and what their views on
Mhm.
these type of benefits are.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on that, I agree. It's to count student loan forgiveness as a form of income. I think it's ludicrous. I mean, you're getting loan forgiveness because you couldn't necessarily pay the debt off, and now to make you pay taxes on the thing that you couldn't afford, it's just bad policy making. But it just speaks to like accountability. If I could just riff off of accountability for a second,
Yeah,
we
please do.
aren't looking at the voting patterns and records for the people that we keep on having into elected office. And so when they're able to come during these campaign periods and spat and talk about the 2.5 bills that they passed, we need to do a better job of holding them accountable. And that's something that the Black Political Caucus is trying to do. And just turn the spotlight back on Stephanie's race. We have a school board that has been stagnant for I don't know how long. If you look at reading and comprehension levels, if you look at graduation rates among African Americans, if you look at college readiness and preparedness, I mean, the numbers are pretty pedestrian. And to celebrate over a half a percentage is really nothing. And some percentages, especially, are going down. And a lot of people like to blame COVID, but the trend was going down before COVID.
Mhm.
But we need to be able to hold these people accountable. If every time you have a critique about education and CMS, you get painted as somebody who's blaming the children, it's like, no, you're blaming the policymakers. You're failing the students. And so it's in the best interest of all parents and even people that don't have kids in the school system to ensure that we have competent leaders who have new and innovative ideas. Because to pat yourself on the back that 3.5 more Black people graduated than last year is not cutting it, and people need to have a higher standard for that. And so, and we, like I said, there's no way to change this if we don't have new people in these positions, having new offices. And right now, we even talk about superintendent. Since I was in maybe middle school, the past 10 years, we haven't had a superintendent serve longer than what is it like?
Well, I was going to say we have a hiring issue there because of superintendent and Winston that was there most recently. My wife's a teacher, and my daughter's a teacher, and so I have very good. I have my opinions on it, and I think making sure that. And let me just say this. I'm gonna say this, and not because I'm biased, even though I am. Right? Teachers are so underpaid.
So
And
underpaid.
literally, check this out. Literally, as a consultant, I was hired to go to one of the poorest states in our country, right? One of the poorest states in our country, Mississippi. I was hired to go to Mississippi as a consultant and teach financial education to children, right? And these were elementary school age children, right? Whew. Right. I deal with adults mostly, but these were elementary school kids, right? And what I was paid for that week of work as a consultant teaching financial education was almost as much as my wife makes a whole month teaching every day.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, some of the admin fees are crazy if you actually look at the budget. And I'll let Stephanie jump into this, but I just want to keep emphasizing the Black Political Caucus point that, schools, our critique is in the policymakers. The teachers are put into a position where you essentially have to be a therapist, you have to work in a essential daycare, and you're given very limited resources. And sure, state level, the funding has been relatively low. All of these things can occur. But what kind of annoys me and parents is we get on the campaign trail. We're going to solve everything. Equity, my favorite line, what do they say? It doesn't matter which zip code you're from, you should get a good education. That's fine. And then you get into office and you say, well, there's not much I can do. It's in bad socioeconomic places and all that. So I just want to push these newer faces, Stephanie Sneed, Dee Rankin, who's doing an excellent job as chair of the education committee for the BPC, Trent Merchant, which I think was also watching, who has an extensive history with the CMS board, but oftentimes brings new and innovative ideas. Dr. Witherspoon, these are people that I think put into a good position will move the board forward. And sorry, Stephanie.
So that's okay. So we covered a lot, right? So the thing is, again, like we have a top down issue, and I think several of us candidates talk about that as well. So a couple of things with salary, money is tied up. We have a lot of money tied up in what is called the Leandro decision that the General Assembly is refusing to release. That will provide funding to schools. But in addition to that, it's a top-down issue in that we have to make sure that, for one, in terms of teachers, that they are in a place that they love to work, right? So teachers we should get them as much salary as possible. But I can tell you, as I repeatedly say, whether they make $10 an hour, or the people I know for a fact as an employment attorney, whether they make $10 an hour or $110 an hour, if you are at a place that you don't like coming to work,
Mm.
then they're not going to stage that. That comes from making things better from the top down, and that starts with the board. That starts with who the board hires as superintendent. We have to make those changes and make administration make it better for teaching our environment. That is going to benefit our teachers and our students.
That's great. And you know, this is a topic I think is so serious and so close and dear to me in my house. I can talk about it all night. But I want
And
to
this
put up
is a
this
topic
comment
all over the country too, though.
all over the country.
It
I
is
want to
all over the country. Yeah.
look at this comment that Harvey Jones put in the chat. If we could bring that up again. In Alabama, removing the authorization to own slaves and making it illegal is being voted on November 8th.
2022.
2022. Isn't that amazing that we could be here and dealing with these type of issues? And that's, again, folks, why we wanted to have the show. Why I wanted to have the show was to encourage people to get out and vote at your local. The other thing is, and I didn't mention it, but I will now, it's just the turnout of votes in midterm elections. Generally are pretty low. What are some of the things that your caucus is doing? And also, I want to encourage people from other locations like Harvey, that's in Birmingham, and people were dialing in from Maryland, is to see what your local caucus is doing, who they're recommending. So what are we dealing? And then we're going to jump on this Thomas Byrd thing too. So what's the caucus doing here locally to get people out?
Yeah, so the BPC, we're campaigning is a ongoing thing, but as far as the early voting, we have extensive kind of volunteer base that's located at various polling locations, and so we're looking to answer any questions that voters may have. We hand out our literature. We had a mailer go out with our endorsements and just talk about our endorsements. So before each election, the general body of the Black Political Caucus makes their choice over which candidates to endorse. And so we do this beforehand. We have extensive, oftentimes, interview process. We have caucusing that goes on. We have, the applications and questionnaire that each candidate needs to submit. And so that mainly goes around kind of voter education, but we also have our Canvas Saturday events to where select Saturdays that are chosen, we go out to a neighborhood and knock on doors to try to get voters out. We partner up with campaigns with their canvassing and GOTV events. So whether it's putting on events, whether it's door knocking, whether partnering with churches, Souls to the Polls is a big deal here in Charlotte. And so we have a pretty an extensive process for getting out the vote, but it could always be improved. And so we're looking for people that are energized, people that want to volunteer, people that have an understanding how important their vote is, and to go out and evangelize that. I mean, let people know, let your neighbors know, let them know that this is another consequential race, whether it's from the bottom of the ballot to somebody who's running for the United States Senate.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the other thing you guys are doing is coming on the Real Money Coach show. I mean, come on, like, we got to get these people out. I do want to flash up Thomas Byrd's comment is talking about the elephant in the room. Several reasons, most significantly, is that is being ignored. Is people have all these excuses for not voting. My vote doesn't count, for one crazy reason or not. And I think in that, what I'm seeing, and then I want to get to Harvey's thing too, as we probably conclude, is the voter intimidation that I'm seeing. I'm seeing reports of that on the news, those type of things. Are there any efforts to combat some of those type of things? I saw where I think some guys were in the hood. They're at the drop off place for a ballot, scaring people. What can be done to offset some of those type of issues?
Some of that is reaching out to people where they're at, and so we oftentimes have this, attitude with political organizations and even some candidates that they just blame the population for being apathetic, like, oh, voters don't care. It is what it is. Well, it's like it's kind of our duty to essentially reach out to people and let them know how important their vote is. You know, a lot of people, especially African Americans, have lived in a place where we've been disenfranchised, and so I'm very
Sure.
sympathetic to the argument that your voice hasn't historically been heard. Um, but at the same time, you can't sit by and let another faction of society make rules and policies for the way that you live their life without your opinion at all. Voting. It's funny when they say your vote isn't counted. It's quite literally the only thing that gets counted is your vote. And so, if you would like to do more, you of course can. But at the bare minimum, I think you don't need to be a subject matter expert to go
Yeah.
vote. Just
Bare
take a look.
minimum vote.
Yeah,
Right.
to go vote, and the onus is on us to go onto radio shows that might not historically focus on politics, to go out and knock on doors. Oftentimes in campaigns, the strategic thing to do is knock on what are called A voters, people that have a history for voting, and you convince them to vote. Whereas, like, okay, well, you don't pay attention to the C voters, people that haven't voted for a while. Maybe they just were waiting for somebody to knock on their door and to inform them. And so we, as the Black Political Caucus, we take on that responsibility of needing to inform people about the importance of their vote. And we're going to continue to do it by partnering with great candidates and putting on events, going on shows, and, just talking about it as much as we can.
Now, listen, let's bring up Harvey's comment again. He says they're in Alabama. They have a Democratic candidate for governor and also for attorney general, and they can't get funding for their campaigns from the Democratic Party. I mean, that's interesting. I don't know what that's all about, but it just made me think about fundraising. And I've never really had this close of a conversation with someone running, Stephanie, but what has it been like for you to raise funds?
No, it's difficult. And it's difficult. I mean, that's a good point, Harvey, that it is difficult to get for Black candidates to raise money, and even so more Black women candidates to raise money. Like it is a difficult task. For one, for one, people are getting donations from folks that they typically know. Like those are your base, right? So are we, as Black folks, donating to campaigns? You know what I mean? Like we have to start thinking in that practice to say, hey, let's support this candidate. Not when it's just like when Barack Obama is asking to spend $25 on a campaign. Like your local candidates, for example, like a school board candidate. Like these things affect your life daily. So we have to get in a practice of supporting the candidates. And I can tell you, that it can be very difficult, getting support in the places that you need them as a candidate.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's an educational piece as well. Like I'm just thinking financial literacy, right? And as we're teaching people about financial literacy, we need to raise this subject up so that it can be part of their spending plans,
They're
right?
spending on your budget,
Yeah,
your charitable giving,
your
right?
charitable
Your
giving.
charitable
Yeah.
giving.
So we as educators in financial literacy need to be conscious of that, so that when we are teaching, it's because we always teach about the tithe, right? But it's also about like the political candidates that shape your life as well. So that's
Right.
important too. Yeah.
So that's a
And I
good
think
point. And it may be that we need to educate, even as a caucus, we maybe should do better
Mhm.
in educating folks on the importance of donating to campaigns, because, what you'll hear is, even like when I'm knocking on doors, like, people ask me about, a Sherry Beasley, Ted Bud campaign, for example. They may say, I see, 10 commercials an hour. Really, I think it's more than that for Beasley, for Bud,
yeah,
and why
you're
doesn't
right.
Beasley have? I may say 2, like, you know what I mean? So that is directly related to, like, we have to, maybe have education about what
Yeah.
it takes to run a campaign and how much it costs. Like people are very surprised how much it costs to run a successful campaign. That you have to pay for literature, you have to pay for if you want a direct piece of mail at someone's house, text camp, all of those things are expenses that I think if you're not in tune to the political world, at least that aspect, besides just showing up to vote, you don't think about that your dollar is needed for those things.
Mhm.
Listen, ain't no poor people running for president and senate. I mean,
Right.
you know, I mean, and so you're right. And then I like Thomas's comment too about Black businesses should support Black candidates.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I mean, my view on this is the same thing: business, politics, and all this, right? And it goes back. Kept hearing it over and over again. Um, you know, we're Black first, but you're
Mhm.
not Black only, but you're just Black first, right? So we got to look out for our community, just like other ethnic groups look out for their community. So I may not be Black only, but I am Black first, and you know,
Mhm.
and I think Black businesses should support Black candidates when they stand. I mean, because not every Black candidate
Yeah.
necessarily needs our vote. I don't want to say nothing about the race in Georgia, but that was,
Right.
let's slide that in there. Okay. So, but anyway,
I heard you.
but you know, we do, and Thomas Bird said he's a former campaign manager, so that speaks to. And then Harvey in his comment says we need give directly to the candidate's campaign, not necessarily the party. And so I
Right.
think those are all very good points. And so, but you know, I think we've had a great discussion tonight. I mean, and Stephanie, thank you for coming on last minute. I was frantic. I reached out to the caucus. I reached out to Kev Barris, and I kind of got it mixed up. If y'all got emails from me with Stephanie, I thought I had her mixed up with another young lady, but you know, I'm really glad that you came on and raised some of the issues that you have about education. And the other thing is this: when we talk about financial literacy, when we talk about these things, and we talk about wealth, and we talk about if we get our money right,
Mhm.
we can afford to give to some of these campaigns, right?
Right.
And so look at Janice said, listen, um, who you give your dollar to is who you give your power to.
That's right.
Don't even get me started. You better come on,
Janice,
somebody,
that's
right?
right.
That's true. Whether
It's
we're
true.
talking about your retail dollars,
Yep.
your campaign dollars, all of it, you
Yep.
know. So that is a very powerful statement, Rainmaker. Thank you for making that. Thank you, Bonita, for putting your comment in there. Stephanie, I want to give you we're a little bit over our show, right? But I
Right.
want to give you 60 seconds to just tell us, and then Caleb, I'm gonna give you 60 seconds to close us out.
All right. So, as a candidate, I have to take the opportunity to say early voting is happening now. It ends November 5th. Election day is November 8th. I'm humbly asking for those of you in the Charlotte area, I'm running for District 4 School Board, which runs from Center City all the way down the east side to Mint Hill. What do I want to do? I want to have a laser focus on student achievement and outcomes, support for our teachers and staff, access to mental health for not only students, but for their families, collaboration. The school board cannot continue to operate in a silo. So we have to have collaboration with our city and county, parents, grassroots organizations, and our corporate community. And the number one thing is we have to have transparency and accountability. Like we have to move the needle in these areas in order for us to have a school system that people believe in, and that we are making sure we're producing that every student is college or career ready. If you need more information about my campaign, visit my website at sneed4education.com.
All
Yeah,
right.
and I'll just say quick words. I'm just going to echo the sentiments that Stephanie made, and just encourage people to go out and vote. I mean, this is to say your civic duty has kind of been oversaid, but we really want to push people and to tell them that this vote is consequential. This election is consequential. And whether it's we're going for the United States Senate candidates like Sherry Beasley, to our Congress member, to folks like Stephanie and people that are running for the Board of Education, we want to push people and to ensure that we hold people who are already in office accountable. We want new and innovative ideas for our children, and we need to push candidates who are going to deliver on those things. And so I'm going to encourage everyone, take the 20 minutes if you're younger. I mean, you spend a longer time on Instagram than you do going out to vote. So please make the time to vote. And so, but yeah, and if anybody has any questions, please reach out to the Black Political Caucus. If you're interested in joining, please email us and we'll get you started.
And I would just add to that, regardless of what city and state you're in, there is probably a congressional Black caucus in your location. So, and just like you said, go out and vote. Listen, and if you go to early voting, there ain't no line, right? There's no line. I even talked about it on my show, on the radio shows, when I went to early vote. I moved between the elections we had early summer and now I changed my address and everything right there at the polling station. And so it's just much easier, laid back, get a chance to go do your voting. So we encourage everybody to do that.
One thing to point out about that, if you're not registered to vote, you can, during early voting, you can register to vote and vote on the same day. You do not have to have ID. You just need proof of address. It could be a bill. If you have ID, that's fine, but something that shows your residency.
Wow.
That's awesome. Now, listen, everybody, make sure you go out and vote in your local areas and know what's required in your state, your district, of what you need to take to the polls. I know that that's a whole nother issue. And remember, when you go out and vote, that also determines a lot of the federal dollars that will come to your region for things like roads and all those things like that. So, and thank you, those who've been very active in the chat tonight: Thomas Bird, Harvey Jones, Dr. Benita Harris, and Trent Merchant, and Janice Leak, and all of you who tuned in for this very important topic. It's not something, and it's related. I mean, it's related to what we do. And so with that, thank you all. Best of luck to you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Caleb, thank you for taking the time out to be on both the radio show and here tonight. And with that, Real Money Coach, we're going to sign off. We will see. Listen, next week, awesome show. This is what we're going to have next week. We're going to have Lance Smith, Marlon Smith's brother, to talk about credit, but we're going to talk about some of the things they're doing with generational wealth. So it's going to be him and his two nieces and nephew that are going to come on the show. And we're going to talk about a real great example of creating generational wealth. Kimberly, thank you for voting early. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Stephanie and Caleb, stay in the green room when we close so we can properly say thank you and goodbye. And with that, everybody, have a wonderful night. We'll see you Saturday morning at 7:30 a.m. on Praise 100.9 and right back here on Tuesday on the Real Money Coach Live Show. Thank you for tuning in.